we'll go ahead and get started with our last speaker today. So I'm pretty excited to have Dr. Kevin Fritchie here with us today. He comes from Columbia, University of Missouri. He's a professor in the Division of Animal Sciences and Department of Nutrition and Exercise Physiology. So for the past 2.5 decades, Dr. Fritchie has been leading a research program that has investigated the effects of nutrition on the immune system. So he has published over 70 peer-reviewed publications, including several recent invited reviews on the topics of fatty acids, inflammation, and human health. So, and if you guys enjoy his speech, again, one more note to him, he will actually be speaking tomorrow at 9 a.m. And fats in your health, kind of a question and answer session, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
More focus on trans fats. We're not going to talk about trans fats today.
Okay. So if you want trans fats, go tomorrow morning.
Well, not if you
9 a.m.
want them, but if you want to learn more about them.
That works too.
And why you don't want them.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So today, Dr. Fritchie is going to talk on everything consumers need to know about omega-3 fatty acids. So for our last speaker, let's welcome him to the front, please.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. And so how many of you actually know something about omega-3 fatty acids? Hopefully everyone. Okay. So if I don't start at the beginning enough for you, stop me, because the worst thing to do is to sit through a talk and get lost in the first 5 minutes, and then it's like you can't. None of the rest of the stuff makes any sense because you need just a few words or sentences to sort of get you back on track. So please do that, and I'm happy to try to make sure that that I don't jump ahead too far. And so I've been doing fatty acid research since I went to grad school at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And what I was thinking I was going to do was I was going to find a way to cure cancer. I was going to be able to nutritionally enhance the immune system so that we would be able to, without having to use chemotherapy or surgery, our immune system would be able to kill cancer cells. And so some of my early research was involved in that. And when I joined the faculty at the University of Missouri in the animal science department, most animal agriculture people really aren't very concerned about cancer in their livestock. We usually don't have them around long enough to worry about them getting cancer. So my focus of my research went more towards immune infection resistance. And so that's what I've been doing for my research. But for today, what I want to tell you about is a little bit about some of the health claims. And again, in this particular area, as well as in many areas of nutrition, I'm sure, the health claims outstrip the facts oftentimes, and there's a lot of confusion that consumers have. And in fact, as members of the educated community who are supposed to be sources of useful information, we find ourselves confused sometimes about, well, I'm not even sure how to answer these questions that some of my customers have. I'll tell you a little bit about, so what exactly omega-3s are, what the current recommendations are, and where we can get omega-3s, because what we think we know about omega-3 sources isn't really as clear-cut as I would hope. And then again, I have a colleague at Penn State who I highly recommend. She's wonderful, and she's a trained dietitian as well as a researcher, and I've provided contact information for me. So if you find that that you're a little confused, or a question comes to you and you're like, let's shove it on to someone else, again, I'm welcoming that kind of opportunity and would be happy to serve you in that way. So we know that too much fat is bad, and what most consumers really find surprising sometimes is that when we start trying to talk to them about, well, not all fat is bad. And in fact, if someone said, well, I think I'm just going to eliminate fat from my diet, I'm going to eat a fat-free diet, well, that's actually not a very healthy diet. And so really part of my goal in any consumer education I do is to get people to understand that fat's not the enemy. We need to have fat in our diet. And so what we're mostly targeting and what we're mostly concerned about is the saturated fatty acids and the trans unsaturated fatty acids, because we know, and the data are quite clear, that many of those particular types of fatty acids or fats are going to increase our risk for heart disease because they're going to elevate circulating cholesterol, which is going to, again, potentially create atherosclerosis. But we also know that some fat choices, and we've heard about the Mediterranean diet and olive oil and how wonderful that is for us, and it's like, okay, those things are true, but today I hope that I'm going to educate you about the omega-3 fatty acids because it's probably the last category of fatty acids or fats that consumers are still pretty unsure about. And so again, frequently I find that when I'm talking to the public, the general public, their sense about nutrition, but certainly fats, is this. And many of them oftentimes just have this attitude, oh, I give up, give me 2 eggs over greasy bacon and toast with lard on it, and just forget all the recommendations from the authorities because they always seem to be getting it wrong, and what's right today is wrong tomorrow. And so we've got a lot of health claims associated with omega-3 fatty acids. And so it's no surprise that some of the people who cash in on consumers' interest in these topics write books that are, let's say, they start out expensive. You pay $15 for this when it was brand new. Now you can get it for $1.99. It's not really worth $1.99. There are some reliable books out there. This is an example of some folks who actually put together a fairly decent, but part of the problem about writing a book, and my wife keeps asking me why I don't write a book, and it's because I'd have trouble living with myself because of having to put so much marketing behind some of these things, talking about groundbreaking things and astounding properties of this life-saving essential nutrient. And it's like, yeah, okay, there are some healthful things about fish oil and flaxseed oil and soy oil, but I know too much to get that excited about it. And there's also terms like natural balance and ratios. There's a lot of stuff out there and misinformation about ratios. What's the right ratio to have a healthy fats in your diet and all of that? And again, these things are oftentimes marketed as being, the solution to the problem, whatever the problem is. Ill health, obesity, cancer, inflammation, doesn't matter. So the author of this book, who's a physician, who immediately when I see MD, I think they don't know anything about nutrition because MDs really don't learn much about nutrition. So that's like an immediate strike against any author. But maybe, again, at least I do respect the fact that he also says, well, I understand that you might be skeptical. And I was like, yes, I am skeptical. And again, he says, well, who is it to say that fish oil is not really a snake oil, a fad that will pass? And I think, to be honest with you, over the last 10 years, I would argue that, in fact, the passion behind fish oil has waned. And it's not the cure-all that it is. And there's a very good reason for that. Because, in fact, some of my research that I did with mice was part of a body of research that showed we could cure almost every inflammatory disease and many cancers by feeding fish oil to mice. Cure them. Or completely prevent these diseases from happening in mice. And then everyone's like, well, isn't that exciting? That's great. No more breast cancer, no more prostate cancer, no more colon cancer, because you feed it to mice and it prevents and cures those diseases. So they spend millions of dollars to do the studies in humans, and it didn't work. And then they say, well, it didn't work because of this. Let's try this. And they tweak it and they tweak it. And now what we understand is that mice are not people. Holy cow. Go figure. So not all fat's bad. Maybe you're gaining the omega-3 polyunsaturated kind. So again, what do we really know, and what can we really reliably say about omega-3 fats? We can say is that we know that they are absolutely essential for the development and the functioning of the central nervous system and the eye, the retina, the portion of the eye that's involved in vision. And this is critical during gestation and early development. It's the reason why infant formula now is almost universally supplemented with DHA, which is an omega-3 fatty acid from fish oil. Actually, it's from algal oil, so it's vegetarian safe or vegetarian acceptable. There's nothing unsafe about fish oil. We'll talk about that later. Reducing the risk of dying of a heart attack. Yes, the data are pretty clear on that. It doesn't completely prevent it or cure it, but it does reduce the risk. It is able to lower circulating triglycerides. Most of the risk reduction in heart disease from fish oil is because elevated triglycerides is an independent risk factor for heart disease. Turns out that fish oil, and again, the amount is interesting. So for the developmental and brain functions, 100 to 200 milligrams of omega-3s a day. That's readily achievable with what we can eat, with foods. To reduce the risk of heart attacks, you got to start dealing with either you're eating fish every day, and not all fish, but some fish, fatty fish, tuna, and mackerel, and salmon, and herring, or you got to take supplements. And if you want to lower triglycerides, you're really talking almost about nutraceutical, drug-like effects of large dosages of enriched omega-3 fatty acids to get these kinds, to maximize this biological effect. So in terms of dying of heart disease, again, the clogged arteries that people die from that result in heart disease or strokes is typically precipitated by having elevated blood lipids for prolonged periods of time, for decades. And omega-3s are not going to reverse the disease that you already have. But what they may do is they may slow or prevent further disease from occurring. They are not a cure, but they can reduce your added risk. So if you're 55 and you've got atherosclerosis, and you've already had a stent put in your coronary arteries, going on fish oil is not going to make your heart like a 20-year-old, but it might keep you from dying of a heart attack in the next 5 to 10 years. So there are a host of controversial health claims related to omega-3 fatty acids. I spent a lot of my career studying the anti-inflammatory effects of omega-3s. And as I've mentioned to you, the anti-inflammatory and the risk, the anti-cancer effects of omega-3s are amazingly potent in rodents and almost meaningless in humans. Lowering cholesterol, in fact, omega-3s are very impotent at lowering cholesterol. They reduce your risk of heart disease because they lower triglycerides. So if you don't have elevated triglycerides, you won't get much benefit. So a lot of the big clinical studies that they've done in humans that are at risk of heart disease have shown only modest benefit because it's only going to benefit those individuals whose risk is associated with elevated triglycerides, not elevated cholesterol. People with type 2 diabetes, asthma, psoriasis, again, blood pressure. See, and these are all the claims that are in these books that now sell for $1.99 on the discount rack because, again, they were basically saying, they were taking the mouse data and saying, this is what these things will do in humans. And when we took the time and spent the money and did the research in humans, it's not there. It doesn't mean omega-3s are bad, it just means they're not going to cure everything. They're going to have some benefit, but a lot of these things that are being, I'm doing a collaborative study with some researchers at the Translational Neuroscience Research Center at the University of Missouri in the med school, and they're using a mouse model to look at autism It's very intriguing research, and we've shown that very low amounts of DHA and omega-3 from fish oil in the diet of the mom during pregnancy will prevent the pups from demonstrating an autistic-like behavior if the moms are stressed at a certain critical window in fetal development. It's a great and exciting model. The data are very, very convincing. It's a mouse model. I've been warning them. I said, it's great that it works in mice, but we need to actually do some work in humans. And again, we can't actually do a randomized controlled trial in humans, but we can actually evaluate the omega-3 intake that naturally varies across pregnant women's diets across the country, and we can monitor the incidence of autism to see those moms who eat more fish or more omega-3s, are their children at lower risk to get autism? It's a useful question. We won't know if it's cause or effect, but it's one that people are going to begin starting to look at. So that's very exciting. So I've been talking about omega-3s. And again, because you're nutrition educators, I'm assuming that you know what a fatty acid is, and that in fact that the diet and the dietary fat that we consume is mostly triglycerides, and that there's these other little bits and pieces that are part of the fat, okay, the sterols, cholesterol and or plant sterols if you're consuming plant oils, and then you've got the fat-soluble vitamins as well as fat-soluble pigments like carotenoids. And again, he loves triglycerides, particularly on his donuts. And so, again, most of the fats we consume, 98% or so, are triglycerides, where there's a glycerol molecule and 3 fatty acids attached to it. Most triglycerides that we consume from natural sources have different fatty acids. They don't have all the same fatty acids on each of the 3 different positions. It's a mixture. And so when people talk about, well, I'm going to have a high saturated fat or a high monounsaturated fat or polyunsaturated fat, again, it's not a consistent thing. There are multiple types of fatty acids present in our fats. Saturated fats, just in case you don't remember your organic chemistry, it's just a bunch of carbons strung together where every single carbon on the fatty acid chain has a hydrogen attached to it in every place it needs to have a bond. A carbon has to be hooked to 4 things. That's the nature of carbons. And so every one of these carbons is either going to be hooked to another carbon and 3 other things or 2 other things. And again, you can see this fatty acid is a saturated one. An unsaturated one is when some of the hydrogens are pulled off. There are enzymes in plants and in animals that will pull the hydrogens off and create an unsaturated bond. Again, those carbons still have 4 bonds, but they're actually sharing 2 of the bonds. And so again, you create this double bond structure, and that's what unsaturated means. This fatty acid is now not fully saturated with hydrogens. So this is an example of a fatty acid that has 1 unsaturated bond. So it is a monounsaturated fatty acid. And if you have more than 1 unsaturated bond, it's a polyunsaturated fatty acid. This is depicting the way a cis, which is the natural, typical unsaturated bond structure. But there is such a thing as a trans unsaturated bond. And that's the thing that I'll talk about a lot tomorrow with the livestock people. And again, there's natural trans unsaturated bonds that happen because anytime a ruminant animal, a cow, sheep, any animal that's got a foregut that's got a bunch of microbes in there, that environment that's created is a place where natural cis unsaturated bonds can get converted over into a trans. And the trans basically means is that this hydrogen flips over to the other side of this. This bend in this unsaturated fatty acid actually straightens out. And then trans unsaturated fats act like saturated fats. That's all there is. There's nothing else wrong with them. It's just that they're still unsaturated, but they behave like a saturated fatty acid. So what all nutritionists need to know about fatty acids, at least as it relates to unsaturated fatty acids, is that there are some that are absolutely nutritionally essential, that all animals and all people require omega-6 and omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. And we call those the essential fatty acids because if the animal or the person is not consuming them, they will suffer consequences. Reduced growth, impaired reproduction, scaly dermatitis. We can generate these symptoms readily in the laboratory by simply feeding an animal a diet that is loaded with saturated or trans-unsaturated fats, but devoid of these particular polyunsaturated fatty acids. Well, we've known for a long time that that linoleic acid and alpha-linolenic acid are the two 18-carbon long unsaturated fatty acids that come into our diet from plants that most animals can then produce the essential fatty acids that their tissues need. What your tissues need is arachidonic acid. That's an omega-6 fatty acid. It's coming from the metabolism of linoleic acid. Your liver will convert linoleic acid into arachidonic acid. That's what you need for growth, for reproduction. Every cell in your body and every cell in every animal's body has arachidonic acid in it. Not a little, but a lot. So you can't eat meat without eating arachidonic acid. You're getting that omega-6 from every piece of meat that you're consuming because animal tissues, every single cell, has arachidonic acid in it. DHA. This is the omega-3 fatty acid that from this 18-carbon long precursor, alpha-linolenic acid, abbreviated ALA, DHA is produced, and this is in every single cell in your body. Substantially lower amounts than arachidonic acid, but it's the DHA that's in your brain and in your retina. Those are the two tissues that DHA really plays a critical structural functional role. So here's basically these fatty acids the way that we depict them. And so I show this because this is why we call them omega-3s and omega-6. So omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. When biochemists came up with the naming structure and how to describe fatty acids, they basically started numbering the carbons from the carboxylic acid end. Because when plants make fatty acids or change them, metabolize them, they add carbons here. This is where all the action happens, the carboxylic acid end. This is sort of the end where nothing interesting happens. Okay, so we don't really metabolize, we don't do much with these things, so they're relatively stable. And as a result, these carbons are numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you look at the terminal or methyl end and you count backwards, 1, 2, 3, so 3 carbons in is the first double bond. That makes that an omega-3. These fatty acids, you count 1, 2, 3, every single bend here is a carbon. So what you're missing is this is a carbon, that's a carbon, and there's these hydrogens that are attached here that we just don't show. And so these are omega-6s, and this is linoleic acid, and when it's converted to arachidonic acid, you can see, wait, there was 2 double bonds, there were extra double bonds put in, and in fact this went from 18 carbons to 20 carbons. So the body added carbons, but they add the carbons on the carboxylic acid end, and they add double bonds, but it doesn't change it from being an omega-6 because it's not doing anything on this end of the fatty acid. So once you consume an omega-6, it stays an omega-6. Once you consume an omega-3, it stays an omega-3 in your body. So to depict what that really means, I'm going to do this. I think there's a timer on here. Okay, so in our diet, when we eat vegetable oils, corn, soy, safflower oil, which is 50 to 80% linoleic acid. Our body will metabolize it to arachidonic acid. That's exactly what our cells need. And that will promote growth, reproductive success, general overall health of the body. When we eat flaxseed, canola, or soy oil that has decreasing amounts of ALA, it will be metabolized all the way to DHA. But you can see there's extra steps added here. This process of going from ALA to DHA is very inefficient. We are not very good at it. Less than 1% of the ALA that we eat gets to DHA. So if you really want to improve your omega-3 status, you need to eat preformed DHA or EPA. That's what fish oil is about. And you can see here it says fish oil, 0 to 25%. 0. There's a lot of fish oil that has 0 omega-3s. If you eat fish from warm tropical waters, there's very little omega-3s in it, because the omega-3s are doing something for the fish and for the plankton where they grow. When the water is cold, these omega-3s with all of these double bonds keep the membranes from solidifying in cold water. So when you get fish out of the Gulf of Mexico, even if that fish could have omega-3s and be omega-3 rich, if it's living down in the Gulf of Mexico, it's not going to have hardly any omega-3s. That's why it's like, oh, salmon. Salmon's great if it comes out of the cold waters up north. But when they farm raise salmon in ponds that are 3 feet deep, okay, the water temperature is higher. Even when they feed them, and they have to feed them fish oil, ground up fish, or those salmon actually won't survive, they won't reproduce. But again, it's one of the reasons why sometimes you have to pay attention to, again, sourcing. And we talked about ruminants only briefly, but again, ruminants will take these unsaturated fatty acids and convert some of them into trans unsaturated bonds. And that's the reason why ruminant fats, dairy fats, beef, sheep, they'll have some of these trans unsaturated fatty acids. And again, not all of them are bad, but again, they tend to behave like saturated fatty acids. We can take excess carbohydrate and excess protein that we eat, and we can convert it into fat to store it for energy for a rainy day. All animals can do that. We do it. Sometimes we do it better than we wish, okay? But we can make monounsaturated fatty acids. Those are the omega-7s and the omega-9 unsaturated fatty acids. We can make those ourselves. So buying a supplement that has a balance of omega-9s and omega-6s and omega-3s makes no sense, because your body will make all the omega-9s that you need. Our diets are loaded with omega-9 monounsaturated fatty acids. Makes no sense. Our diets are rich in omega-6 fatty acids. Buying a supplement that has omega-3s and omega-6s in it makes no sense, because there's no deficit of omega-6s, at least in our diet. So again, in Western societies, we really don't have a problem with essential fatty acid deficiency. But there are some people who are claiming that there's way too much omega-6. There's too much corn oil and soybean oil used in the US diet, and that's a problem. And that this is creating an imbalance, and that there's way too much omega-6s, not enough omega-3s, and so it's precipitating all kinds of health conditions. These are very strong claims that are being made by a small subset of experts. And they're saying we need to dramatically reduce our omega-6 intake, really changing the entire agricultural landscape. Stop feeding corn and soybeans to livestock. Stop eating eggs that are from animals that are being fed corn and soybeans, because the omega-6s are dominating and it's killing us. There's no data to support it. They keep making these claims. They've been making them for 20 years. And the data, in fact, contradict those claims for the most part. It's not stopping them from making them. They sell lots of books making those claims. So what are the actual current recommendations? Well, on the omega-3 fatty acids, what I can tell you is that the one that we have the most interest in, and the one that where the data are the strongest in terms of there being health benefits, is DHA. There's less information and evidence to support EPA, another fish oil omega-3, as being healthful. It's not that it's bad, it's just that in and of itself, it's not particularly impressive. And ALA, even though it is by definition, it is the dietary essential omega-3 fatty acid, again, there's not a lot of data to support that adding ALA to the diet actually yields health benefits to individuals. So today we see that the current recommendations for omega-3s are about 1.6 grams a day, less than 1% of the energy. And the bulk of this is coming from alpha-linolenic acid, the plant-based 18-carbon long omega-3, and a rather modest amount of EPA and DHA. There have been some concerns about, and some effort by some people in the field to say, you know, we need to up this. We need to increase the amount of omega-3s. There seems to be sufficient evidence to support this idea. And so again, there have been efforts to try to actually create a dietary recommendation for long-chain omega-3s, the EPA and DHA, and not just the 18-carbon long plant version. Again, there is still no specific recommendation that identifies that EPA or DHA is a nutrient that has to be in the diet. So there's been workshops over the last decade or so. And again, the effort has been to try to convince folks that the data from epidemiological studies from human populations, free-living human populations that tend to consume higher levels of DHA and EPA, the fish-eating Japanese and some of the people from the Mediterranean populations that are along the shores that consume fish regularly, that their incidence of heart disease and other kinds of health conditions, type 2 diabetes, obesity, inflammatory diseases, is reduced. And again, that this level might be a more healthful level, which is mostly going to be beyond and above what is currently being consumed by most U.S. Individuals.
I mean, they say you help your brain too.
Help your brain. Yeah. But you know, in the U.S., we really don't like that. We don't really want people thinking too much, right? That's an antithesis to the whole, you know, I mean, we're in a presidential election year. We don't want people thinking. Oh my God, this is being recorded. I'll be hearing from Donald Trump, I'm sure. So there are some of us in the field who think that there would be some benefit to actually having a specific dietary recommendation, a target for EPA and DHA. And but again, it's one of those things where the debate continues. And I think maybe within my lifetime that we may actually end up getting there. So what a lot of you will come to grips with, at least probably once every couple of years, someone's going to ask you about flaxseed or flaxseed oil, right? Have any of you been asked about flaxseed? Some of you might even be taking it, okay? And it's fine. There's nothing wrong with flaxseed oil. And in fact, if you go to the hardware store, you can buy linseed oil. Okay, linseed oil is flaxseed oil that's been boiled. And they boil it because it oxidizes all of the unsaturated fats, and it makes a great treatment for wood. Okay, not so good to eat. Okay, linseed oil is not edible. It's been oxidized and polymerized. And in fact, if you go to the grocery store and you buy flaxseed oil, after you open the flaxseed oil, oxygen is going to get in there. And within 6 months, that flaxseed oil is going to start smelling like varnish, because the oxygen you let in every time you open it up is going to react with the unsaturated fats, and it starts polymerizing and starts forming lipid peroxides. It's not very healthy for you. So that last couple of ounces of flaxseed oil, put it on your furniture. Don't eat it. And the same is true for fish oil, cod liver oil, right? Back in Great Britain, they used cod liver oil because it was rich in vitamin A and D. And again, it was loaded with omega-3s. And, they would, teaspoon of cod liver oil every day, right? Any of you ever do that? If you're, there were, a few people still did that. And again, it was mostly for the fat-soluble vitamins, not for the omega-3s. But again, cod liver oil, it gets rancid pretty quickly, easily. So soybean oil is about 7 to 8% omega-3s. Canola oil is actually about 20% omega-3s. So from a vegetable oil perspective, these are pretty good sources of the omega-3s, the plant-based omega-3s. And they're used widely in cooking and in various products, okay? So, and again, people ask me, well, do I use canola? Oh, yeah, I use canola, I use soy oil, but do I think I'm getting omega-3s from them? No, they taste great, they cook pretty well. So, they're great to use, but again, I take fish oil occasionally because I want DHA, because this brain needs all the help it can get. And again, the issue really is that in human beings, and even in mice, the ability to convert ALA into EPA and DHA is very, very inefficient. And most of the experimental data shows if you're looking for a health benefit from omega-3s, you're not going to get it from consuming ALA. You're just not. And it's not that it's bad, it's just not going to get you what you're trying to do. So the American Heart Association makes recommendations about EPA and DHA. And again, the other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of times supplements, they have a variety of mixtures of EPA and DHA, and we really don't know what the right mixture or ratio is. And don't believe anyone who tells you that this is, 2 to 1 is perfect, or 1 to 1 is the right. We don't know what the right ratio is. But again, what I focus on mostly is DHA. I think that's the one that we probably have the best argument that there's some value in it. And a lot of the fish oils tend to have more EPA, so you have to go looking for what, tuna, for example, is one of the few fish oils where DHA dominates over EPA. Some of the fish oils will have 3 or 4 of these for every DHA in it. Just depends on what they were eating. Sometimes people have concerns about mercury contamination. And again, the mercury is in the tissue of the fish, not in the oil. So studies have shown that when they actually look at mercury contamination, PCB contamination of fish oils in supplements in the market, this has not really been a problem. The manufacturing is pretty high quality. So it's really not been a major concern. The big problem is for pregnant women, they are told to avoid certain kinds of omega-enriched fish because the fish flesh contains mercury. That is an appropriate thing to be concerned about, certainly when you're pregnant. And in fact, there's even, fish that you should probably, they say, don't eat more than once a week because of contamination of heavy metals. And I just wanted to sort of show you so the relative strength of the effect, of the biological effect of omega-3s. And again, what we're really talking about is EPA and DHA. This represents the range of current human consumption. So people who are on the very low end will get benefits in terms of the anti-arrhythmic effects of omega-3s. The ability of omega-3 enrichment of your heart tissue to prevent your heart from going into arrhythmias when you have a heart attack. So even if you aren't prevented from having a heart attack, when you have one, what will kill you is not that you're having a heart attack, but that your heart goes into fibrillations and doesn't move the blood. And if you don't have an EMT nearby or an emergency room nearby, you will die before you get to the hospital. And so having omega-3 enriched tissues in your heart actually will help have that. And that benefit can happen substantially with a very modest increase in omega-3s. So probably the single most important benefit of just going from someone who is like, I hate fish, I don't ever eat fish. If you don't ever eat fish, maybe a fish oil pill is the right thing for you. The ability of fish oil to prevent clotting, antithrombosis effect, has been, for many years, it was thought that was the way fish oil prevented heart attacks. It made the blood, it reduced clotting of the blood. That's really not very useful. Lowering blood pressure, yeah, there's some evidence of that. Lowering heart rate, maybe. Triglyceride lowering, again, that's a linear relationship. And so to really maximize that, you got to really be consuming really large amounts of omega-3s, more than you can by diet alone. So again, there are some clinicians who will actually provide you with a prescription for a highly enriched fish oil that for $7 a pill, you get bucket loads, you get this kind of range of omega-3s. Not exactly something that's worth spending the money on unless you're really at risk. Oh my goodness, that's how Mizzou was a couple of weeks ago. So sources of omega-3s, again, seafood. These are mostly going to be species of fish that are in cold waters. And so again, if you, and you can get good omega-3 content from farmed salmon. Just because it's farmed doesn't mean it doesn't. It depends on what they feed it and the conditions that they use. So in this case, actually, the amount of omega-3s in farmed was a little bit higher than the wild. It varies. It's not a fixed thing.
How would you know that when you purchase it?
You don't really know that. There's not any real easy way to do it. So I tell people that farmed salmon is a lot more available and is priced better. And if you even buying it frozen, that's what I buy. I buy flash frozen salmon that's in vacuum sealed containers rather than buying it fresh, because it's been sitting in that, thing for God knows how many days. Well, so this is a video that was supposed to basically, it rarely works. Oh, here, let's see if I can get it. It's a commercial from a British company that actually talks about why it's not behaving itself. Oh well, so in any case, it's really cute. And what it shows this Eskimo fishing, right? And so there's a very nice, stodgy old British voice in the background talking about if you can't get your omega-3s the traditional way, buy our supplement. And then a killer whale comes up through the ice and eats them. It's all CGI, it's not real. So you can get omega-3 enriched eggs. And again, some of the omega-3 enriched eggs are enriched by feeding flaxseed oil to the chickens. Chickens aren't very good at converting flaxseed oil, ALA, into DHA. So when you buy omega-3 enriched eggs, you don't know, unless it's local, unless you know who's doing it. Are they feeding long-chain omega-3s by fish or fish meal to the chickens, or are they feeding them flaxseed? And if they're feeding them flaxseed, there's not going to be that much DHA in there. So to get 400 milligrams of DHA, you got to feed fish meal to the chickens. And again, there's no requirement in the marketplace when you're marketing omega-3 eggs. All you know is they're enriched in omega-3s. You don't know which one. And again, we've talked about, so there's also beef. If you grass finish beef, they will have more omega-3s. The amount of omega-3s in beef from grass finished is the equivalent of an eyedropper of fish oil. So it is more omega-3s in grass-fed beef, no question about it. Is it useful from a human health perspective? Probably not. If you like the taste of grass-finished beef, great. But if you're going to try to say, oh, this is a way to get your omega-3s, no, it's not going to work. We know infant formula, and again, this makes tremendous sense. And in fact, it's actually hard to find infant formula now that doesn't have omega-3 supplement in it. It's almost irresponsible to produce it without that. It'd be like producing it without iron supplementation. And again, they don't use fish oil in this. They use an algal oil. They grow algae in this huge vat. The original source of omega-3s in the seafood chain is from algae and plankton, which then little crustaceans eat, and then little fish eat the crustaceans, and then bigger fish eat the littler fish, and then bigger, and all of a sudden you got tunas and everything, and it's like, ah! So the food chain, it just keeps going up the food chain. But it all starts with the algae. And again, it is vegetarian, it's considered vegetarian.
Why isn't that more available? I mean, if we're not going to go with the fish, that would be cheaper for...
Well, so algal oils, it's a bit intensive, okay? It's not like you can, you'd sort of think, you look at some of the farm ponds and you go, wow, there's a whole bunch of algae growing in those. If we could figure out a way to get, omega-3 algae to grow in your pond, we haven't figured out how to do that yet. So it's expensive. And so again, infant formula is a product that you can price to get your money back. But to put it into the regular food supply, it's a little bit more challenging. And right now, fish oil is cheaper. But it wouldn't surprise me if within our lifetime, the algal oil actually becomes cheaper. The fish oil industry is really interesting. I mean, the ships that they have out there are the size of football stadiums. And they actually catch the fish, process the fish, flash freeze them, grind them up, separate the fish oil, all in the ocean while they're catching them. Within hours of catching the fish, they've got it all separated out, boxed, frozen, ready to go. And when they pull into port, they just unload all of the finished product. They don't bring it's not the way it used to be. And so it's like, whoa, it's pretty amazing. And that's really important because the quality of the fish oil deteriorates. The longer that fish is sitting in the hold, the more you've got stress on that fish. If that fish dies, the oil starts deteriorating. You start getting oxidation products, off flavors. So it's pretty amazing watching that. So again, this is the grass-fed beef. Again, I'm not opposed to grass-fed beef. I think, it's sort of an acquired taste. But what happens is that as we take beef off of pasture and finish them in corn and soybean, at the end, in the feedlot, their omega-3 content goes down from 1%, which isn't a whole lot, to less than 0.1%. So it goes down by 90%. So if you keep them on grass, they'll stay at 1%. 1% omega-3s in beef, is it going to make a difference? I don't know, a little difference, but I don't know, maybe the beef checkoff dollars, they can use some of it to promote that. They've talked to me about it. I'm not convinced that it's actually something that as a human nutrition person, I would recommend it as being more helpful just because it has that 1% rather than 0.1%.
What about the whole profile? I did a paper on grass-fed beef. And the whole profile of less fat, a better saturated fat, got the stearic acid, which doesn't do anything.
Yep.
Lactic acid, but I know that science is mouse studies.
Yeah.
I know that. And then there is more omega-3s, and then that omega-6 to omega-3 balance is better. And I know you said that they've improved in that.
Yeah.
If you do the whole profile, maybe grass-fed is better.
Yeah, I think as a whole food, I think you could make that argument, and probably what there isn't yet data are to actually support it. I think we have the pieces. Yeah, we have the pieces of the puzzle to say that there's every reason to believe that it's a reasonable hypothesis to test, but we need to actually do a couple of studies to see, well, would it really make a difference? But and again, would I pay more for it? I'd probably pay a little more for it if I liked the taste. If I didn't like the taste, I'm not going to pay more for something that I don't like to eat. just because I think it might be healthy. I'd rather take a fish oil pill. So again, supplements are unfortunately going to probably be part of the story for a while if we really want to try to maximize the benefit of DHA's potential health benefits. And so the thing I try to steer people away from is that pay attention to the amount of DHA, how many milligrams you're getting for the calories, because actually some people take 9 or 10 1-gram capsules a day. That's 9 calories for every capsule. All of a sudden, you're at 81 calories of just extra fat you're just taking in. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And this triple omega, omega-3, omega-6, omega-9, if any product like that, I immediately just trash it. It's a total, it's a joke. Makes no sense to be doing that. Some people, will say, well, what about cod liver oil? It's fine, but be aware that if you're taking cod liver oil as a source of omega-3s, you can overdo it and end up with vitamin A toxicity. Your hair will fall out. If you want to do the bald Telly Savalas look, great. If you don't, maybe you don't want to be using cod liver oil as a primary source for omega-3s. So again, look at the cost. A lot of times, I buy the double or triple strength. And what they do is they take fish oil and they put it in a huge tank and they chill it, and all of the saturated, not all, but a bunch of the saturated fatty acids in fish oil will precipitate out, and they skim off the liquid fish oil on top, which is going to be richer in the polyunsaturates. And so they take all those saturated fats and they feed them to pigs and cows and chickens, and then they take the skimmed off part that's going to have higher amounts. So that's what they're doing, is they're basically increasing the amount of omega-3s simply by using cold temperature to cause the saturates in fish oil. Fish oil is 25 to 35% saturated fatty acids. The first studies in the early 80s that they did in human clinical trials of fish oil and heart disease elevated LDL cholesterol because it was so high in saturated fatty acids that it was like, it was worse than bacon. And so it's like, oh, so now again, the double strength or triple strength is going to have higher amounts of omega-3s, less saturates. And again, the liver pills, you have to be a little concerned. Avoid the shark liver oil. Shark liver oil's got a bunch of stuff in there. There's a bunch of voodoo behind it. I wouldn't use it. I do recommend enteric coated. That usually doesn't add too much price or cost to the pills. And for a lot of people, if you take fish oil pills, an hour later, particularly if you take fish oil pills with hot tea or hot coffee, within 10 minutes, all of a sudden you're like, all your friends and neighbors are going to be like, you can take fish oil at night when you go to bed. And again, if you're burping up fish oil, you won't know. Only your partner will know. So again, you can do analysis to look at, how much money you're spending per gram of omega-3s. And again, focus on the DHA. So the ratio of EPA and DHA, like I said, there is no perfect ratio, but you can see some of these products end up with higher amounts of EPA. I think in the end, 10 years from now, my prediction is that we'll come to understand that DHA is what we should be focusing on in terms of our health. And that's what we probably should be paying for. Not that EPA is bad. We do convert some of the EPA to DHA. EPA has independent health effects, but the data are less convincing. So again, there's all kinds of, if David Beckham, if he promotes it, then it must be good, right? There's omega-3 supplements for your dog and your cat. You go to your veterinarian, and again, it's like, really? I mean, I got a smart dog, but I don't think I want him any smarter than he is. So again, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, the fish oil industry and the supplement industry. Fish oil is in the top 5 of all supplements and herbals that are consumed in the US. So it's a big, big deal. And in fact, there are many of your clients who might be taking fish oil or some other fat or oil supplement. And if you don't ask them, they won't tell you. And you can at least give them a little advice about maybe how they could spend their money more wisely. And this is just a little joke about, you want to take some omega-3s. You are omega-3s, the fish say to each other. And again, really, we shouldn't be worrying about the PCBs. The evidence suggests that the fish oil industry has actually done a pretty good job of monitoring themselves and doing pretty good quality control. So I don't think we should be worrying about contamination of fish oils, at least at this point. There could occasionally come up a bad actor in the field, but generally every time someone's gone looking for trouble, they haven't found it. This is my colleague, Penny Chris Etherton, who's at Penn State, and she is an outstanding expert in this field. And she actually is more of a human-directed researcher than I am, and she's been involved in some of the clinical trials. And so again, she's someone who you could touch base. You could Google her, look up her website. She's got recommendations and other things. We don't always agree 100%, but anytime that we disagree, I'd go with her as a default, okay? So I trust her opinion in many ways, and sometimes, we'll be at meetings together and we'll prepare talks, and we won't even talk to each other beforehand because we're too busy, and we end up giving talks one after the other, and it's like we find that, again, we're mostly in agreement, and every now and then, we deviate here and there, and it's usually something that we then, put a free Diet Coke bet on, see who in the end is going to be right. And again, feel free to contact me by email or phone if you ever have questions or anything that comes up regarding omega-3 fatty acids, so I'm happy to help.